Hey there, and good morning, or as I clear my throat, officially good afternoon. Gosh, today is resume renovation. Let's get it up here on screen. Hang on one second. Welcome. Just posted a new article on resumes today. Check out my Facebook or Twitter or over on my LinkedIn, and you'll see that. But complexities around the length of your resume. So do check that out. You'll see it posted. Let's just skip right ahead. Now, starting Tuesday, this past Tuesday, we did Supercharging Your Job Search. That is still available over on YouTube and, of course, on my Facebook. Today is Resume Renovation. Next Tuesday, that's coming Tuesday, that'll be a 5 p.m. lecture. We're going to do LinkedIn for job search. And then next Thursday, that is the part 2 to my LinkedIn called Career Evolution, preparing for your career's next leap using social media marketing. So all good lectures, be sure to join into anything you can or watch them on the channels afterward. So today's lecture is about taking back control, as really all of the lectures are. Today we're going to think about this lens really focusing in on resume. You know, when I chose the title, Resume Renovation, I think that really hits the challenge. This isn't a little fresh coat of paint. This isn't a little wallpaper, maybe a new drape over by the window. This is, let's break it down to the studs, get it all the way down to the foundational level, and rethink everything strategically. That's what's required to make a really great resume. By the way, a really great resume is not the resume that you like. I wish it were. I'd like you to like your resume, but that's not really it. A great resume is the one that fulfills its mission. Its mission is to deliver almost every single interview that you are right for without really having to fight or struggle for those interviews. If your resume is delivering the interviews, probably don't need to change it. If it's not delivering the interviews that you want, definitely need to change it. Now, solving resume issues is a couple of things. We're going to talk about both of them today, and it requires a massive shift, a paradigm shift, both in our story itself. We're going to have to rethink how we've told our story. We've told our story for so long, we've really forgotten how to tell it in new or other ways that are still very truthful. And we're going to have to take that new story itself and take it into a new format, a format that solves the basic problem that no one will read. End of that sentence. I just wrote an article today, and yet no one will read. It's about a page and a half. It won't be that long. But my gosh, no one will read. So we have to take that into account in terms of the format and really understand how the format, much like a baby doesn't want to eat on its own. Oh, maybe hungry, but doesn't want to eat on its own. It takes a lot of work to feed that baby. It takes a lot of work to get them to absorb your career value, your story. And essentially, you have to spoon feed it to them with the right format. We're going to go over all of that today. Now, another concern, of course, is we have to show ourselves being able to work remotely. It is still a pandemic world. And post-pandemic, whenever that time does come, no matter what they say, a great percentage of people are never going back to that office, no matter what they say. And I think the whole workforce is going to transform. If you've not worked remotely, suddenly you're no longer the shiny asset that they might have thought you were, because we're in a more remote working world. Probably have to shift your story a little bit. Maybe you've dealt with a number of these different folks you see on screen off-site. Yeah, that's not the same thing as you working off-site, but this is how you split story and begin to tell it in a little bit of a different way. Maybe you've done a lot of speaking. Maybe you've done conference calls or spoken at conferences or done webinars. And all of that is, again, interaction off-site, even if you were on-site. Another way to illustrate that you're comfortable at a distance, comfortable delivering value remotely. Part of the paradigm shift in how we're going to have to tell our story. By the way, paradigm shift applies to a lot of things in job search, because I'm also a big believer in not applying for jobs. Really, don't mishear that. Literally said, I'm not a big believer in applying for jobs. In fact, if a client comes to me and they say, oh, I saw a great job, I'm like, fantastic, let's not apply for it. And I mean it. What I mean instead is let's go right after the decision maker. Let's not get caught up in all those people that want to screen us, evaluate us, take our temperature, get some blood work, see if we're all right for whatever they have on some list somewhere, get right to the decision maker, and all those kind of ridiculous questions, at least in my view, all those ridiculous questions go away and they begin to react to your value. Screening is about keeping you away from the decision maker. I want you to get to the decision maker. And that means a metamorphosis even in our approach. In case you haven't seen me before, John Crant, author, career coach, and speaker, resume and LinkedIn guru as well. Now, my background, and you should understand everyone's background that is teaching you so you know how to parse and value that information. I have 7 or 8 years on a desk as a typical recruiter. That's a headhunter. I have to go into the competitor company, find the superstar, lure them out, shepherd them through the process to get hired at the new place, really like a glorified dating guru, really. Very, very close to the concept of the millionaire matchmaker. Well, maybe I should have gone that route. Who knows? Who knows? Ended up being the national trainer. So 100 office recruiting system. Every single office that would hire potential recruiters. These are usually top people out of their fields in the industry that can now flip that knowledge and go find those people. All we have to do is teach them how to be a recruiter. They already have the rest of the knowledge. So those folks would come into my 90-day program. By the way, many of them were already hiring managers many times over, thought they knew how to hire, and yet I would have to teach them how the hiring process really works. Not how people think it works, because it really doesn't work that way, or we wouldn't be tuning into today's lecture. In the end, of course, I was VP over all 100 offices before heading out to do what I do now, which is helping individual clients reinvent and elevate their value across their resume in a very succinct way, like you're going to hear today. Also in an expanded way on the LinkedIn side. Be sure to watch the LinkedIn lecture. That's a very, very good one that'll help you as well. And of course, helping them begin to understand how to approach that decision maker directly, bypassing those people whose mission in life is to rule them out. Those folks are not the decision maker. My book will give you some good advice as well. We don't need to look at that too much. It's over on Amazon, up on my site as well, selfrecruiter.com. On my LinkedIn, a few other resources. You can click on my articles. Not only will you see today's article, which is really about understanding the devastating impact of having a long form resume. Oh, it feels safe, but boy, read that article for some in-depth behind the scenes analysis of how it actually works directly against you. Other articles, how your resume doesn't become resume roadkill, piggyback onto the rest of what I'll teach you today. How to supercharge your job search, piggybacking on Tuesday's lecture just passed, and how to avoid the biggest mistake in job search. Besides length of resume, that is really time mismanagement. It is the only resource that we have, and we have to be very, very careful. LinkedIn lecture itself, you can go over to selfrecruiter.com, my website. It's right on the website, halfway down the page. You can see me large or see the slides large, whatever you want. Really use it as a start and stop tutorial while you rebuild your own LinkedIn profile. Self-recruiter, both today and all of the lectures. Becoming a self-recruiter is becoming one singular great recruiter that only really works with one amazing candidate, and that's you. You're going to have to sell yourself in job search, so it's better you take on the role of a recruiter and begin to think of that role that has to get you through the obstacles, has to network in a very different way, has to keep one eye on the toughest competitor imaginable. 4 or 5 or 6 people dying for that job, even more than you want the job. We don't think of all those people, we're not going to beat them, but we can beat them if we think about them, if we strategize. Not as simple as just seeing, I'll see the job, I'll go after it, I'll just get it, if it was only that easy. But, everyone's sitting home doing the same thing you're doing. They're hitting that darn button. Almost always says submit, all capital letters, till we're so submissive, it's like a Friday night. It's a rut we get stuck in, and we have to get out of that. Leaves us in a pretty unhappy place, and we have to think about how we're going to move away from that. Now, if we've gotten let go, laid off, or whatever it is, we feel an extra badge of dishonor somehow. A lot of people get cut. A lot of organizations are in reorg. It happens all the time. But the perception is if you got laid off, oh, you must be the bottom 10%, bottom 10% have to go type thing. And suddenly we think of ourselves that way. A little bit of the usual customer expected. Well, move over to this place. You have to allow yourself to think in unusual, unexpected, unconventional terms. Your job now that you're looking for work is to be persuasive, believe in your value more than the next 5 or 6 people that are dying for that job. Let's talk about the resume itself. Now, why is it in electronic world that we're in today that the resume still matters? And does it? Well, I'd say it certainly does. Resume still tends to be the first point of notice, taking note of us, being aware of us. Yes, they can find us through LinkedIn and other places as well, but statistically, it's going to happen first on the resume. That's one of the reasons. It's also in my view, a very tactile, because they're eventually going to get it and print it out. That's a very tactile representation of our background. And if it's done the way I advise, which is to shrink it to a single page, and we're going to get into all that detail, your entire career story is now visible within one shot of the eyes, being able to be digested in under 3 to 5 seconds. And they leave with an elevated feel of your brand, excited for the discussion. That also requires a massive amount of editing in your story. You can't tell everything on the single sheet of paper. In fact, you should save most of that story for the interview or for an expanded telling of that background over on the LinkedIn side. Take control of the discussion. You know, when you have a longer form resume, or probably a more traditional resume like you have right now, you look at it and the story is everywhere. It's a wall of text. You're going to see a few examples of those coming up. And that is not controlling the story. That's allowing the reader to meander wherever they may like to or not like to, and absorb whatever story they were able to get or not get. That's a lot of lack of control. I want you to have much more control by taking control of the discussion. Now, if we're going to solve the real problems, you have to understand what they actually are. So let's look at the actual numbers. Then you'll begin to understand the challenge. So any kind of a decent job, 1,000 to 2,000 resumes going in for that job. 1,000 to 2,000 resumes, that's the reality. Giant wall of competition, right? 90-95% of these are not right for the job, by the way. You're right for the job. That's great for you, great for you, great for you. But you're mixed into all of this nonsense. This it's like snow blindness, resume blindness, few dozen, few hundred. I can't tell who's who. I can't tell which one's the right one. By the way, who could read 1,000 or 2,000 resumes? Anybody? Well, of course, we're in a world where no one wants to read. How do you read those things and do all of your own work? But it's still not it, because it's not only the resume, it's the email, it's the cover letter itself. So we're at 3,000 items we have to read before we can even think and still do all of our own work. Now, that's only a little snippet, a little tiny view of the challenge, because if you're working with a recruiter, that's an internal recruiter, HR person, or an external headhunter like I was. Either one, both of those functions tend to work on 10 open jobs at the same time. So it's not 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. It's 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. Who could read 30,000 pieces of messaging and information? I just don't know anyone. And your brain is probably going, oh, that's what that applicant tracking system is. Ah, they got me in the ear. One of those tags. You see the animals walk around out in the wilderness with the tag. Someone got them. You want to be tagged that way? Is that what you want your future to be? You want to put your future at the whim of some machine pulling you out of this list of 30,000 pieces of messaging? To me, that's really not the right way to go. But now you understand the blinding storm of information that has to be clarified, and why your background, your story, has to be a dead bullseye every single time. And I'm going to show you how to do it, even if you're after different types of jobs. You have mere seconds to capture their interest. It's the literal 3 to 5 seconds they're going to make a decision about you, whether you move forward in the thought process or you do not move forward in the thought process. And in that time frame, not only must you be capable, qualified, interchangeable, but if you're only that, I'm going to pay you less. Oh, you're that? No, I'll take, yeah, I love number two. But but you're going to get less. Oh, you don't want less? You want less? I'll take number 3. No, I'll take number 1. I'll take number 5. Doesn't matter. I'll take anybody in this list. You're interchangeable, and I am paying less. So your job is to not only be capable, qualified, interchangeable, but also be that standout, somehow also be exceptional. And that's how you get a different offer, a different responsibility, a different compensation package, maybe than they even had in mind when they first started. Now, I don't want to set the expectation here that you're going to, tune out after this lecture and go spend 2 hours and have your brand new resume. You may spend 2 hours and have a brand new resume, but that's your first iteration of your new resume. Very likely you're going to need 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 iterations of your resume to get to the right version of your resume. Please don't stop the process too early. I know it gets harder and harder with each revision, each iteration, but getting to the right version will open doors that you never dreamed existed. It will make people jump out of their chair in discussion and react to your value in ways that you never could have perceived previously. I know it's hard to imagine that, but life involves taking a measured risk. I invite you to take a slight measured risk today with maybe a resume that didn't work before. If it wasn't producing the interviews you wanted before, why not try something that may seem radically different to you? But I guarantee you, when you try this over time, you're going to see a very different result than you saw previously, because small changes change perception. Now, what is our story? Story. I love story. Don't you love story? Has such a wonderful color to it. Story. We expect richness and detail and okay. I bet you've told your story so long in the same dull way every time you've ever spoken to someone about a new opportunity. I don't know if you really understand how to tell new stories. So we're going to have to go back and rediscover it. You're going to have to look at yourself as a person you don't know. Then the recruiter side of your brain is going to have to do a deep dive inventory. By the way, let me get a little drink. Exactly what I do with my clients. If I'm helping a client reinvent their background, cross resume, cross LinkedIn, we start with about a 90-minute deep dive interview. This is not a 20 question answer like your typical interview. This is everything. This is under the bed, under the rock, in the closet, behind the desk. We are digging through every single piece of the background to figure out what was missed, what is not here, what did you not tell me? Every little thing. Well, I was working at Denny's, okay, but don't put that in there. I'm like, well, I'm not likely to put Denny's on the resume, but I have to know. There may be so many other things that could be of interest, and emotionally you've already assigned some, oh, that's a turd, get it off me, it's a turd. And it could be a nugget of gold. One point, a couple years back, working with the chief communication officer, a couple of very large brands, reinventing the whole background. This person's in their late 40s at that time, and quite a history, quite a wonderful background. And in discussion, same as you're hearing here, deep dive interview, uncovered their very first internship. What are we talking, like 30 years ago? what is this? 20 some years ago, 30 years ago? Internship in discussion, and absolutely found its way onto the resume. And of course, I send the new resume to my client, and we get on the phone, and I can tell they like it, but there's a couple things they don't like. I can hear there's a but coming, and over the phone, I can tell their eyes are going right down the page, all the way to the right, over to that internship. ABC Television World News Tonight. First internship right out of a top journalism school. Why would that ever come off your resume? Really? Don't understand it. But to them, oh, it's an internship. It was nothing. I have impressive things now. Really? Coming out of a top journalism school, that's what you landed as your first internship? And it wasn't just that I put that there. I had the gall to put detail. What are you doing in your first internship from decades ago? This, that, the other thing, airport pickups? Oh, yeah. Do we need that? Ugh, get it off me. I said, well, that's only because you're not thinking clearly. Let me help you. I said, you came out of the top journalism school. This is the first thing you land. Wow. Who are you picking up at the airport? People that are on television. People that are on television need a lot of handling. You're a kid just getting out of school. You land this job and you have the finesse, the nuance, the capabilities and communication to deal with those people. It speaks to exactly why you would rise to be chief communication officer at these compelling brands up on the resume. Oh, I love it. I love it. Don't touch it. Went from being a turd to get off my shoulder to nugget of gold. I love it. You have the same issues. You're going to have to go back and discover those important things that you've forgotten or tossed away. When I do it with my clients, I get 8 or 9 pages of notes. I bet you're going to come up with 8 or 9 pages of notes. You know what? Everything on those pages is precious to my client, as it will be precious to you because it's your story. 8 or 9 pages do not fit on a single sheet of paper. How are we going to do this here? Why don't you grab a highlighter and now be very stingy? Nothing gets a highlight unless it's truly resume worthy. Does it rise to the level of elevating my brand, being so distinctive it cannot be not mentioned? If you go through your 8 or 9 pages and very, very carefully, where's the ruby, where's the diamond, where's the drop of perfume, the nugget of gold, only that stuff gets the highlight. Now you have a core idea of what must come onto the resume, and everything else has to be filtered. Everything else has to be filtered through a lens. Trap on a lot of resumes is that people try to prove something. Now, don't mishear things. Resume is not where you prove anything. Again, don't mishear. Whatever's on the resume has to be absolutely letter true. But first off, there's no sin of omission. I grew up Catholic. I know all about sin here. There's no sin of omission. I can leave anything I'd like on my background out of the resume, as long as every single thing that's on that resume is absolutely letter true. So I have to think about that in the storytelling process, and I have to think about how I edit this story down to control how they connect the dots in their brain. Again, back to the trap of the qualified and capable, that really comes down to duty, responsibilities. And I always love to say when I'm in front of a live audience in person, I said, oh, duties are like duty. Nobody's interested. Always gets some laughs. You know what? But there's a lot of truth there. Duties and responsibilities, that's not what I want to see on the resume. If I was interviewing you, I am pretty sure I really already get what your duties and responsibilities are. What I need to see is the compelling piece of the story. Where did you touch something? Where did you transform something? Where did you have some effect? That's the story, not a laundry list of the duties. That's a snooze fest. I'm a big believer that in large part, the duty and responsibility piece should not even be on the resume unless we need it to tell it as part of a compelling side of some deliverable piece. But not list it just to list it. Otherwise, we might as well list. We can type in Microsoft Word and use PowerPoint, which is equally ridiculous on a resume these days. If we can't do those things, I don't understand how we're employed in the modern world. The decision to hire you is not the capable, qualified piece, although I have to perceive you as capable and qualified. It's why are you interesting? What makes you tick? Which could have something to do with your work life, could have nothing to do with your work life. Think about that for a second. Why people choose people. We're going to come back to that. Take all those notes about yourself, and you're going to have to think about all the rest of that content that's across the 8 or 9 pages. Some of it will rise to elevating your brand, all the different things that could separate you out from others without diluting your story. You can't just put everything in your refrigerator into the pot and expect this is going to be a delicious meal. It takes some editing. So yeah, we're going to have to be really, really careful. We have to think about the personal branding. All the rest of that content, we filter through this singular question. Why is it going to be the best business decision they make today if they choose to hire us? Is this one of those items? Great. It needs to move on to the resume. I have to find a way to fit it there. It's a nice piece, but it doesn't rise to this. Leave it off. Save it for a discussion. Save it for the LinkedIn side. Now, after one of these lectures at the New York Public Library, I got hit in the head with this brick. Gal comes up to me and she says, well, I've been told all I can expect is more of this. Gives it to me. I'm like, what is it? What is it? Now, if you haven't seen me before, I think you already get a good sense of my energy, which is about the same in front of a live in-person audience. I am always nicely caffeinated, a lot of adrenaline going on at the same time because I'm passionate about what I teach. And In a live presentation, hour and a half, 2 hours later, you can imagine I'm pretty wound up at the end. Comes up to me, presents this, and right away, under the hot lights, I start to fall asleep. I'm like, that's not going to be very nice. I better ask a question. What would you like to do? Oh, I'd like to be in events. I'm like, oh, good energy. Have you ever been at events? Ouch, 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 ouch. Let's just bring this center stage. I am me with my entire background. And even me, all I can see is impressive law firm, impressive law firm. That's all I can see. And that's why they say, oh, more law firm for you. That's what's happening for you. I can't even see that it says events coordinator, and I have my background. If I can't see it, how do you think any of those people are going to be able to see it? So we're going to have to add some clarity here. This snooze fest. So my follow-up question was, have you ever done events? Zooming in, it doesn't really solve much as either. How far do I get before I completely tune out? Oh, yeah. I've done lots of events. Same background, by the way, you're looking at now. I've done events at the Heller Gallery, at Guggenheim, at the Met, at Morgan Library Museum, at Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York Public Library, if I missed that one. Oh my gosh, why don't you tell that story? Well, I mean, I did the venue selection, the catering, the speaker selection, the speaker wrangler. Who are these speakers? Ted Koppel, James Carville, Mary Matlin, Tom Brokaw, Charlie Rose. Yeah, well, some of those names we have to update a little bit here and there. Same story. Now, if you didn't connect the dots yet looking at this new version, when I create a resume for a client, not a single sentence anywhere on the resume. No sentence structure here either. Why would I put a sentence on a resume in a world where people no longer read? You're going to have to evolve your style, remove all the extra water that is diluting your story. That's all the extra verbiage, all the extra words that don't belong. Without sentence structure, this clearly communicates all the reasons why this person is the best thing since sliced bread in events. Of course, they're working in events now. Other thing to consider here is the level of transformation. Now, this was blocks and blocks of text that many resumes have to deal with, and we have to evolve that. How do we make a product essentially come to life, become three-dimensional out of this flat wall of text? You're going to have to think about your product. You're going to have to think about how you create engagement, which is actually a lot closer to this type of engagement than the other type of engagement. Small little changes everywhere on the resume are going to make a big difference. Now, I'm going to show you some other resumes that I just pulled off the internet and poked some holes in their style to give you a sense of perspective. And then I'm going to take you into detail to show you what I really recommend that will transform how people think about you and your personal branding. Again, last reminder on brand here. Think about all these things that can separate ourselves from others. These resumes here, and we'll go a little bit smaller so they can be a little bit bigger. There we go. These resumes here, I just pulled right off the internet, so careful where you're putting your resumes. I was over on Pinterest, someone was collecting resumes, and I'm like, oh, well, I like resumes too. Let's take a look here. So I pulled a few of them. I thought we could just react to these and poke some holes. Now, Kelly here, kudos to Kelly on his or her brand, big, bold, with the last name there, which I erased, is all the way across the page. I'm like, big, bold, can't miss it. Okay. Now, I'm not sure really that was the right choice because first off, shades of yellow is a little hard to look at on screen. As it prints out, it's shades of gray, which really undermines the brand value a little bit. So not really sure that was the right choice. And that's the last positive thing I have to say about this resume. What this resume suffers from is essentially what most resumes suffer from, a complete failure to understand or consider information architecture. Look at any decent sized building. It doesn't have to be amazing, just any decent sized building. You can't just build that thing. I mean, it's so complex, the piping, the electric, the this, the that, all the pieces that have to be considered from an engineering standpoint to make that function. What if only 30% of this resume is going to be read? Well, which 30% should be read? That's up to you, the person that creates the resume, to decide and control that. No. They're only going to read 15% of this one. Which 15% should we read? Do I start on the left and go down? Do I go down here and go across? Complete information architecture problem here they never even considered. You've got only seconds that they're going to look at this stuff and suddenly made a big mistake there. Julia! Julia, can't miss that one here. Now, I didn't write the commentary here, but down on the bottom it says, in case it's too small for you to read, it says, well, who said the name had to be at the top anyway? Okay, I'll say it. The name has to be at the top. Subtitle of my book is Changing the Rules. I'm a big believer in changing any rule that does not work for you in job search, but this is not a rule that you can change. There are certain usual customer expected things you must stick to. Now, if we're thinking about a stack of 1,000, 2,000 resumes, where's the name typically? Up at the top, in the middle. Where's the employer titles? Employer title, employer title, employer title, education. Where's their eye pattern? It's a reverse half moon. This resume completely destroys the eye pattern. You might think, oh, but they get a special look. Okay, I see the name, and then I arrive at the same information architecture problem as the prior role. I don't know whether I'm supposed to start below Julia, absorb that, and then go back to the top, or how's it supposed to work? Also, cannot see Julia's employers. Now you might go, but John, they seem to be fuzzed out a little bit. You're right, they are, and that's not what I mean. I mean, intellectually, I could go find those employers, but I have to go intellectually on a hunt to find them. They're buried in the middle of the text. The employers determine almost every single ounce of your value, like it or not. So we're married to those brands forevermore, like it or not. They carry the weight of the value for us, and they're hidden away. In fact, the only thing that can actually see on this resume is the reason I would not hire. Dates are a reason I do not hire you. Dates are never a reason I hire you. Now, dates are expected, so that's we want some dates. But if you understand this dynamic, why would you put the dates anywhere near where their eye pattern is? Why not put the dates as far away from their eye pattern as possible? And please not in bold. And how about a smaller font? Don't look here, even though I provide them. Look at another example here. Martin. Kudos to Martin, too, on his brand. By the way, I've seen this style so many times over the years in so many books. I've seen it on a lot of resumes crossing my desk as well. Okay, so kudos to Martin on the brand. It's a good branding. Do I believe it's worth 25% of the entire real estate to tell me your name and contact information? I think it's an incredible waste of space. Really, really difficult to deal with. Also, basic information architecture problem. Am I supposed to run down this blue column first or blue and over? How's it supposed to work? And if I just stand back, all I can actually read is education, internship, and personal skills, which have absolutely nothing to do with Martin's value. Those are section headers, and yet they draw all the focus. None of Martin's story draws the focus. That's a real problem. We have seconds before we're in a discard pile if we don't play our personal branding game correctly. We have to be capable and qualified, but the story also is largely about why we're interesting, what makes us tick, what drives us. And that can be a story that takes place from inception, even activities in school, all the way through today when it's controlled on a narrative thread, all within this singular view within seconds, like one giant exclamation point of why I have to speak with you. A little more clarity between resume and LinkedIn. Now, this is the resume lecture, but these two marketing documents are related, and you have to understand. Resume is about catching or piquing that interest, making the awareness spike about us, not telling the whole story. If we've told the whole story on the resume, we've missed the entire point. This is the appetizer. Have you ever gone out at an expensive restaurant and had an appetizer? You know, one of those $15 appetizers? You know, what happens? Out comes this gigantic plate. It's gigantic. This plate is so big, I can barely fit it in my place setting. I think it's meant to be shared at $15 or whatever it is. And yet the actual appetizer, if we get up, is this tiny little thing in the middle. And then there's some drizzle all over that plate, maybe a little sparkle, a little splash, whatever it might be. My gosh, that's a delicious, delicious little thing. Do we understand the purpose of an appetizer and why it is tiny? The purpose of an appetizer is not to satisfy or quell your appetite. It's the opposite. It's to excite and ignite your appetite. It is to make you hungry for more, not to satisfy. Same thing, the same concept needs to apply to your resume, getting them so excited they have to have and know a little bit more. I can't resist speaking to you. Now, for those folks that are hardwired a little bit the other direction, that's why LinkedIn exists. It's a marriage of two documents that tell the story in a very different way. On the LinkedIn side, we have a greatly expanded telling of the entire story. Any detail they might have wished was on the resume should exist on the LinkedIn side, so it closes the deal in their mind as kind of the very best individual. This is how you influence other people. Back to this personal branding, and let's see if we can add some clarity, even to this wall of text here. So zooming in, we see some of the same problems. We have to add clarity and clarity and a little bit of influence, clarity of the career path, clarity of our story. Plus we have to influence them about all the deliverables, the value, ourselves as a product. Go back to the new version. Suddenly I would argue that the law firms here are just as elevated, just as impressive. And yet the whole impression isn't just law firm, more law firm for you. The story isn't the law firm, even though that's the brand and leading the value. The story is the deliverable of your expertise in events, married to that nice, expensive brand. Imagine you could do it for these people in these venues and these type of speakers. Gosh, you would elevate my events and venues and everything that I'm doing if I hired you tomorrow. So let's hire you. That's how we begin to create that engagement, which is much more like that engagement. Let's deep dive into resume renovation itself. Now, there's 5 key areas that you have to look at to create a winning resume. We're going to come back to each one of these and do a deep dive into them. You are this product 2, resume, the new definition, your resume's goals. Don't worry, coming back to every single one of them. Understanding stacks of resumes and the 3-second tests. Right back to the beginning. You are this product 2. When a company chooses to hire you, they're really buying a product, or at least they're buying our time and talents. And we get that part. Okay, I may not like it, but I get it. I get it. So I'm going to have to be the brand. I'm going to have to be the embodiment of the brand. I can't just be this. A lot of job seekers are this. They like it all dressed up, look good. I just shaved right before the lecture. Look really good, everything else. And it was, I'll just be the pretty little flower, pretty little flower. They're just going to pick me. They're going to pick me. They're not going to pick you. It doesn't work that way. Somewhere in the process of engagement, you have to stand up and recommend yourself as the right solution. You have to teach them how to select you as the right individual. That's the point of discussions, and why questions and challenges should never frighten you. They should excite you, because they wouldn't waste oxygen in discussion if they weren't thinking, oh, maybe I have to ask you this. Understand a product and how we market that product, which is you. Resume, the new definition. Got a lot of ink? We got a lot to write down here. Not really. A simple sales sheet to create desire. I can point you toward a very effective, simple sales sheet for comparison. I don't know if you get out shopping very much these days. I certainly do not. Most of it is delivered these days. But back pre-pandemic, I'd be walking to one of my lectures, have a little bit extra time. I'd be walking by a Best Buy window, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I feel a magnetic pull toward this window. There must be something in there. I should go look around, some gizmo or whatever. Sure, like most guys, I like a lot of electronics. And you start going in there and take a look around, and they make some very big things in there. 71 inches, 81 inches, 115 inches, those very big televisions. Never going to be able to afford that 115-inch one. But unless you are single, that's not an individual decision, unless you don't like your life. So they make something called a tear sheet or a sales sheet, shiny little thing, one single sheet, maybe double-sided, glue on one end of the pad, sitting right next to each one of those big purchases. So I can just, oh, it feels so good to zip off that sheet off the glue, like so satisfying. And I can take that sexy sales sheet home and go, my gosh, if we had this television, I'd do the chores on the weekend without being asked. I'd mow the grass. I'd take out the dog for their little walk. I'd do all that without ever being asked if we had this television. So transformative. Everything I need to go sell the television. Your resume is a sales tool. The person you're connecting with is not a salesperson. They are not skilled at walking down the hall and selling you to another person. Your correct resume acts as an aid to help them walk down the hall and sell, even when they're not very good at selling themselves. Simple sales sheet that creates desire. Your resume's goals. Well, its mission in life is to deliver the interview. If it's delivering the interview, don't change it. Not delivering the interview, please change it. There's something not right with it. If it's going to deliver, here's the goals. It has to have a clear, clean, straightforward format. This is a format where the information itself literally jumps off the page for the reader. It's put together in such a way that whatever I think is most of interest to the hiring individual, not me, the hiring individual, is put together in such a way, look at this word, that can be easily absorbed. No one wants to read, absorbed. Of course, we have to inform about educational background as well. Now, understanding stacks of resumes. What's this all about? Now, if you didn't listen to me and you did apply online, you know I'm not a fan of that. I know some of my clients are going to apply for some stuff online. I sure hope that they don't apply for the jobs they really want online. That's kind of silly. But yeah, I know you might stop at the bodega to buy a lottery ticket sometimes. I occasionally do. I certainly do not plan my financial future because I stopped at the bodega to buy the lottery ticket. I wouldn't plan my career future because I applied for a few things online. I would plan my career future by approaching the right decision makers at the right organization. So back to where I started. If you didn't listen and you did apply online, what happens? Your resume is going off toward a gigantic black hole in space called the data warehouse. If it reaches the black hole, kiss that resume goodbye. Not very likely to see that resume too many times again. On the way to the gigantic data warehouse black hole, it is going to stop in front of a person and all these resumes stack up. That is your chance for that quick look about you. So they're going to take a quick look at you before they're going to sort you into one of three stacks. The first stack is, oh, there might be somebody in here. That's the good stack, by the way, stack number one. Or maybe, have to come back. Stack number two, have to come back. But they don't come back. They don't come back because first off, I'm starting with 1,000 to 2,000 resumes. And once I get through that stack, I have a whole new incoming river of resumes. Why would I go back to these folks that couldn't quite convey their value to me the first time in a succinct way when I have all new exciting people to move on to? Stack two becomes a dead end stack, just like stack three is thanks, but no thanks. Don't even know why you sent this resume in. Now, the secret that you may not like to this whole process is the length of time to make this value judgment about you. It's literally 3 to 5 seconds. I know trainers tend to exaggerate to try to pull you over the finish line of whatever they're trying to train. This, you will never get longer than 5 seconds before you're into one of those three stacks. And you have to begin to think about that. How do you get into stack one? Your first goal is to get into stack one, or they're not likely to ever really read the resume or read the cover letter or read the email because I can't look at thousands of those things. I have to distill it down to a number that makes sense. 1-page resume, unless it's 2, but I hope you see how unhappy I am at the end of it. There's no way I'm ever going to tell a client it's okay to have a 2-page resume. A 2-page resume undermines your value, undermines your story. Everything is left to the wind. 10 different readers all will have a different conclusion about your value based on their own perceptions. Let me grab a tissue here. Your job is to control so as many of the 10 different people you send it to all have the same impression, elevated impression about you, and that begins the interview discussion at a different place than previously. Distill your resume down to a single sheet of paper. They have to be able to see the entire journey in one look without flipping a page, and in that one look within seconds, that is how they quickly right up to the symbol crescendo at the end going, get them in here, get them on the phone. I can't resist. I have to know more. I have to speak with them. That is the goal of the resume. It must be a single sheet of paper in my view. Now, what are we looking at? We're looking at your name, which is your brand, your current or last 3 employers and titles, and your educational background. Now, let's just stop and do a listening test because I give this lecture in person and I'll hear people right after go, oh, John said just put the last 2 employers and titles. He did? When did he say that? I certainly did not say that. I said what we're looking at for time, relevance, and skill, by the way. If you'd like to know what I'd like to have on a resume, I'm so glad you asked. I would like a resume to be complete. That's from the time you entered the workforce to today. Again, that's a listening test. Were you listening? I said, it's what I like. You know, if you're Resume goes back to 1972. I don't need to see back that far. May not need to see back to 82 now. Time keeps passing. At some point we may have to cut a little bit. We're going to have to think about that because that has its own dangers in cutting our background. You definitely have to be in the same generation they're expecting if you walk through the door or tune in on a Zoom meeting. You can't show up and they're expecting your grandchild type thing. That really doesn't work very, very well. 3-second test for resumes. Now, if you have your resume, pull it out. Let's take a look. Just for you. So don't look at your resume yet, but pull it out. When I tell you to look at it, I want you to look at it with fresh eyes. I don't know this person, which is you. In the time I tell you, I'll say start and I'll say stop. In the time I allot you, by the end of it, when I say stop, just rhetorically tell yourself what you know about this person's value. Go ahead and take a look. And stop. And for those that didn't have the resume, you saw me do 1001 all the way to 1005. It is never going longer than that. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Most people, when I do that in person, they look up and go, it's like deer in the headlights. They're like, I can't tell you anything about this person. It's me. You need to change that resume today. I object to objective statements all of the time. Objective statements, summary of qualifications, core competencies, everything I've ever accomplished since kindergarten. Somehow that all migrates over time to the top of our resume. We don't read a single word of it. We purposely shield our eyes. I would open the person's resume. I'd look at the name. Oh no, don't look there. They're trying to persuade me. Employer title, education, decision. Based on my view of those employers, right or wrong. My view of what I think you did in that role without reading a single thing. My view of your educational background. Oh my goodness. I sure hope we have a very similar background, or how could I possibly think about you the same way you think about you? That's the problem. I think what you need to do is take this collection of laundry that gets left out on the line up at the top of the resume, remove all of that, and use that space for something else that I call the positioning title. Simplest iteration, that's 4, 5, 6 words that are a dead bullseye for every single job you are ever going after. That is the part of the resume that ultimately changes. When you get to the right version, the right iteration, that's the right resume. The resume itself never changes, but those top 1, 2, 3 lines of positioning title, that changes, so that everybody that ever picks up your resume, they see you as a dead bullseye for their job. Just what I'm looking for. Fantastic. And they look down the resume, absorbing your contributions. I have samples coming up to show you. Think about rethinking your entire resume. Now, this has a typical positioning title right on the top of the page after I get over getting hit in the head with the brick. How many words do I get in before I fall asleep? High energy. And I'm gone. I'm gone. All I can actually read is profile and professional experience. Again, labels pulling the entire focus. This is the same background. High energy events planner, specialist. Bullseye for exactly. And then down the page, of course, they're going to see all of things. Now, these are different people that you're seeing here. This one's got campaign director, media and public relations, and community liaison. Of course, this is an example where down the page they've actually held those roles before. This one, I'm going to walk you through the entire resume coming up. This is a person that wanted to go a completely different direction from what they had done in the last 10, 11 years. And we had to use the positioning title to grab control of the decision maker's brain. Sales professional, extensive experience in contracts across industries, software, hardware, services, just what I'm looking for. And then they look down the resume, seeing the contribution, which is not in software, hardware, services, thinking of how good this person could be and where their desire is. By the way, they're working in software, hardware, services now. We'll give you the rest of that story coming up here. So back to this original. Think about your challenge of clarity. How do I take this dense stuff, and it may even contain some of the story. I have to make sure consistency is there. I have to make sure the story elements come to life. I also have to make sure that whatever verbiage I'm using is not the wrong stuff, like I coordinated things. Sounds so low level. Got to move away from things like that. Into a version like this where we get the whole story to come to life in the reader's mind. Again, look at this version and begin to think about how it can fade away to the background and the real story comes to life with a little bit of work. Or you could go back to the one that really doesn't work and suddenly have this dense wall of text that they tune out. They don't even see the person's an events person in the way this is presented. Or we can have a very different result, again, by going back and adding clarity. This is what you're trying to achieve in the 3, 4, 5, however many iterations to get to the right version. Where's the original? Where's the new one? How much clarity is there? Where could I add even more clarity that might make this come to life in a very, very different way? A lot of personal branding things to think about there. Martha Stewart Living on this resume. Now, it's on the resume now, but the first iteration, their first version that they presented to me certainly did not have it. They were getting mature, so they grabbed their scissors and cut. Oh, cut off 93. We don't want to show 93. Okay, but you're a person of substance. You're still going to have to walk through the door someday or see them on video. Nothing wrong with showing 93 based on who you are. And you want to work in events, you're going to cut off Martha Stewart Living or House Beautiful Magazine where you did an event at the Guggenheim, or European Travel and Life Magazine where you did event-related things. We have to be very careful about where and what we cut. Don't cut your story off simply over fear of a little bit of maturity. By the way, if we're fearing maturity, I have a sample coming up that will help you sidestep some of those date issues and yet still get the value from that story. Now, I promised you more story on this one. This person was down in the Carolinas, very interesting. You know, they call me up and they're like, I need some help. I moved into contract furniture sales 11, 12 years ago. Had a great run, by the way. Oh, so done selling furniture, But I send my resume out and they go, but we don't need a furniture salesperson. Why are you talking about furniture? Now, let's go over the new version here. Price Modern, you may have known them as a brand. I did not. Corporate office furnishings, right under Price Modern, the only 3 words that ever mention or point toward furniture. Hayworth as a brand, certainly did know them. Other than those 3 reference points, there's not a single thing on this sheet of paper that says furniture. Why are we talking about furniture? Talk about sales. Accumulated $50 million cumulative sales to date. Ranked top 10 in revenues every year since 2002. Built a strong pipeline. Every single thing that would make the sales manager jump out of the chair. It's all the reasons to hire you. Then we use their positioning title to fix the problem. Now, originally, when we talked about the furniture thing, I said, well, what do you want to do? I want to be in software, hardware, and services. I'm like, oh, great field. I used to place that field. Have you ever done it? Ouch. I did do it 15 years ago. In fact, their entire resume was almost the last 11, 12 years that at the time that I worked with them. And a couple little footnotes of the brands at the bottom, no detail. So we had to take the last 11, 12 years and condense it down to this super paragraph of accomplishments you see that then allowed us to open up the earlier brands. And right there within eyeshot, they could see software, hardware, services. They see it at the top. They see it down the page. You're going to get that conversation. By the way, I bet you there's a few people on this session today that maybe your challenge is to sell 15-year-old experience. And this is the start of how you begin to do it. So think about how that really everything that we've assembled here are all the reasons that I must speak with you, all the reasons that I have to hire you. Perfectly links up and supports, even though this is not software, hardware, services we're looking at right here, all supports that. Another resume. Now, there's a whole resume above this, but there's some points at the bottom of this resume to teach you some very, very good elements. If we are one of those folks getting mature and we begin to take the scissors out, you're going to have to decide where you start and stop your story. And that was the case with this client. We decided to either start or stop their story, depending on how we're looking at it, with EDS, Electronic Data Systems. Now, if you don't know EDS, EDS is one of those employers. Every industry has one of those employers. If they hire you, oh my God, they hired you, you must walk on water. Financial services, do you know who that is? Goldman Sachs. Doesn't matter what you think of it. Goldman Sachs is the one. Same impression. So EDS has that same reputation. Great place to either start or end the story in 1999, as you see there. Now look just below that. You have 3 prior employers. You have 3 prior employers, and 2 of these 3 prior employers also rise to that same level of stunning. Kaiser Permanente and PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers. Oh my gosh, that is the same level of stunning reputation. They see 3 crown jewels all within an eye shot of each other. Let's go back to this prior employment. These 3 prior roles add 17 years of extra background. Anybody here need to be 17 years older next time you go into that next Zoom meeting or next in-person interview? I don't really think so. Maybe a couple of us, not very many of us. So that is 3/4 of 1 inch on the sheet of paper. And we got all that extra value. It's not simply about everything having to be big. Oh, I don't want them to miss it. Make it big. Nonsense. Big does not make it digestible, absorbable. It's understanding and controlling things so they can absorb it. 3/4 of 1 inch, no dates. By the way, some sizing, and sizing is coming up. Just on these prior employers, let's show you what's here. The brands themselves are probably about 8 point in size. The titles are probably about 7.5 point, not bold, but italicized. Locations probably down to around 6. 3/4 of an entire inch on the sheet of paper. And you see the stunning effect it has in the brain of elevating your brand. They all hired you. Oh, look down at education, some other stuff to teach you here. On the left, we have 2 degrees. We have 3 universities here, by the way, but only 2 are treated the same. You know why? Excuse this word coming up. Because you know what? The other is a certificate. And even though if this is your field, you're probably jumping out of your chair over that PMP. PMP. I get it. I know the PMP is the cherry on top of everything. And it does not trump the degrees. It belongs subservient to the degrees. Therefore, the degrees are handled the way they should. Same as employer title, by the way. And the other things, which are not degrees, are handled 1 stage down, 1 size down. All of that. Plus community involvement. Oh my gosh, does that even belong on the resume? I think so. I want them to see that you've been so busy doing great contributions to these employers, but oh my gosh, you also found time to be a good human being. It's the character vote. By the way, good works do not expire. Doesn't matter when they were, as long as it's true. You worked for Habitat for Humanity on some 2-week project, whatever. My gosh, it has to be on the resume. People will all want to talk about it. Oh, Habitat for Humanity. You know, that was in 2004. I went down to so-and-so and blah, 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 and I just tell the story. Doesn't matter when it was. Think about how you begin to transform across the resume. It's a lot of work. We have to look both at the story, but also the format. So let's go ahead and give you some sizing here. You're going to take everything on the page and highlight it. We're going to have to pick a font. I'm a big believer in picking Arial. Arial is my first choice. Verdana and Helvetica are also very good choices. Arial is my choice. Make everything on the page Arial. Make everything on the page 10 point. Are we sitting down? Because we're going down from 10 point. These are not for you. You have the wrong idea of what creates legibility or readability. It's certainly not font size. It is the font size in conjunction with the line space, the space between the lines, and the space between the characters. All of that together is what really constitutes amazing stuff. Why you should be listening to me on this part of it, there's another piece of my background I didn't mention earlier. Before I ever went into recruiting, I ran a pre-press service bureau, which really means I do understand line and type and spacing and how that affects things on a physical document like a resume, also in a digital world like over on the LinkedIn side. You can take the measurements I'm about to give you right to the bank. Now, I do not have these written down anywhere. I suggest you write them down right now. So everything on the page, we make 10 point. That's where we're starting. Now, I'm going to go up to the positioning title, and that is always a bullseye for the target job I'm after. It literally is going to say whatever the job title is I'm going after, even if I've never held that title before. I'm not misrepresenting. I'm presenting myself as qualified for that role. They can clearly see looking down the resume, I've not held that title, but I'm presenting myself for this role. Bullseye, bingo. Looking down the page, then we have the brands. That's Good Samaritan Village, Salvation Army, United Way. The brands are 10 point bold. Notice that the comma, location, and date are not only not bold, they certainly are not 10-point. In this iteration, they are 7-point. Let me just pull these larger. There we go. I can be small for a little bit. You look at these a little bit larger. So that's great. Those are 10-point bold. The rest of the line is 7-point unbold. I like 2 points of space. If I can get this over, we can see it. 2 points of space right after the brand. We're going to show you how to add space vertically and how to add space between characters coming up. For now, you can just write it down. 2 points of space after the brand. We'll show you how to do it. Now, this first one, Good Samaritan Village, has an extra line. Oh, the nation's largest not-for-profit long-term care organization. That is there because of a problem. The problem is that I spent 13 years in Florida before I escaped. I certainly did. I got out. There's hope for others. I can tell you from that experience, every second or third mobile home or trailer park in Florida ends in the word village. There is nothing wrong with working at a mobile home or trailer park. But I cannot possibly let someone perceive that this person had amazing employer. Oh my gosh, your career went into the toilet. What happened? This is another significant employer. If the person sitting next to you has never heard of the employer, use a line like this, a descriptive line to elevate the employer's brand. If the person sitting next to you has heard of this brand before, do not use this extra line. Use that space to tell your story. So much more valuable. Rest of it. Come back to that special line here in a minute and give you the sizing. Let's get on to traditional employer title. Salvation Army. So the title line, I like a 0.5 point less than the brand. That means it's 9.5 in size, not bold. If it's bold, they're both fighting in the eyes. The brand's fighting with the title, and they're both pulling. Doesn't work. Has to be harmonious. Still has to draw attention. Slightly smaller than the brand, 9.5, in italics, but not bold. They both work in harmony. Now, I like 4 points of space after the title, before the bullets. We're still going to show you how to add that space coming up. The bullet set, each bullet set you do one at a time. I just highlight the whole bullet set. Now I make it 8.5 in size. When I do, it's going to get a little tight, a little hard to read. It's all still highlighted, and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to add space between the lines, which is still coming up on how to do it. And after every bullet, I'm going to add 1.75 points of space, magically returning the breathing room that makes it absorbable as long as I remove the dense text and allow the story to come to the surface. Back to that special line there, that nation's largest non-for-profit long-term care organization. If you need the descriptive line, and please only use it if you really need it, that descriptive line is 8 point and has 2 points of space after it. Now, professional experience and education, 2 of the labels. You heard my criticism on some of the earlier ones that I showed you. I like that to be 8 point or 7 point bold. In this iteration, it's 7 point bold. All caps, but when you make it 7 point bold, all caps, it's going to pull the eye too much. So you hit it with a little bit of gray so it disappears into the background. It provides structure, but it disappears into the background, and your story comes to the foreground. Brands we already talked about, make sure they are visible. Notice what they want, which is employer title. Also notice I have indented the bullet points to make sure that what they want is served up on a silver platter, so easy to get to mentally. And yet, with the formatting that's going on in these bullets, I'm essentially luring them into reading the story that they really are trying not to read. Think about all that spacing that we talked about. It's incredibly important to accomplish what we want, and if we're going to get what we'd like to think about. Spacing's still coming up, but I want to show you a couple other things here. Just waiting for this to come up here. Your contact line. Big believer. It needs to be a single line all the way across the page, not stacked up like a layer cake eating up real estate. That's not going to help us. So this contact line, we're going to start it with your LinkedIn URL, followed by the city, state. I don't need your address. We're not going to hire you because you live at 123 Any Street. Followed by your email and followed by your cell phone number, not your home phone number. I don't care that you can't get your cell phone at your home. It's your cell phone number that goes on this document. If the document achieved what it needs to and they're excited to talk with me, they're going to pick up the phone easiest to get to in a Western brain, left to right. It's right there. They're going to call me. If they're not quite convinced, but almost convinced, they're going to click on that LinkedIn where they get to the fuller, rich sales brochure about myself with much more detail. And that's going to help close the deal. That's the contact line. Now, adding space. Now, here's where I have to insert a little bit of an apology for Microsoft. I hate to apologize for Microsoft, especially since I don't like them. But I do resumes in Microsoft Word just like everyone else does. But the problem is Microsoft never has fixed this software. Same problem has existed for decades. And that is, if you do all of this work I just described to make your resume perfect, if you were ever foolish enough to follow some instruction and send that Word document to someone, you have no idea whatsoever what it looks like. It could look very similar, could look like a completely different animal. So we really need to think about this spacing, and we'll show you how to solve that word problem a little bit later. The other apology I have to give on behalf of Microsoft is the fact that there's about 20 different versions out there. Your version could look very similar to this, could look like a completely different animal. So you might need to learn the concept and then go find these tools on your version. So back to adding spacing. I'm going to go up to format, down to paragraph. And the box that pops up is going to have a little piece that says points after. I simply type the 2 or type the 4 or type the 1.75. By the way, after the framing structural pieces, which is professional experience and education, I like 8 points of space after that one. Didn't mention that earlier. You just pop it in the box here, hit enter, and magically that space just appears. Now, how do we add space between the characters? By the way, your contact line is a great example. I didn't give you that sizing either. Contact line of your information, I recommend you make that 7 point. Yep, 7 point. And when you do, it's going to go like this and be tight, unable to read it. It's still highlighted. You go up here under format, down to font. The font window is going to pop up. And if we click the advanced tab, you can easily expand or contract character spacing. In the case of my contact line, I expanded by 1, 2, 3 points until it literally spreads across the page, and even at 7 point, completely readable that way. This part's a little extra work to add the spacing, but it will make it beautiful. Remember, 4, 5, 6 iterations to really get to the right version. Work pedigree. Well, that really triggers some strange reactions, like racehorses, dog food. Okay, we got the right word. That's what we were going for. A little bit of a trigger word. Probably getting the 3 to 5 seconds of the resume, but probably not really understanding the evaluation. We're looking at the quality or perception of the quality of these companies, titles and accomplishments, even though I said we wouldn't look at those things, and of course, educational background. Here's your proof, by the way. World's simplest resume. Todd Smith, Nestle USA, Director of Quality Assurance. Kraft Foods, Quality Assurance Manager. Coca-Cola Company, Quality Assurance Engineer. University of Florida, BS in Agriculture. If this is all that's on the resume, I guarantee you it's about the world's simplest resume. And yet everybody watching here has some opinion about Todd's background. Let's say, oh, he has the degree. That's usually a pretty good thing. Oh, I can see career progression. I see engineer to manager to director. 3 stunning employers. Oh, those are stunning employers, aren't they? Aren't they? Now, when I do this live in person, well, this is live, but when I do it in front of people I can see, someone will go, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. I go, how do you know? I never worked food and beverage, but I've worked a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies. I have one of my clients that worked for GTE Internetworking, which became Genuity, and Level 3 Communications, and Liberty Media, and Nokia Siemens Networks, and Cisco Systems. And I can tell you every single one of those companies are absolutely messed up beyond belief internally, like a gigantic meat grinder grinding up and spitting out their people in endless reorganization. Maybe these are the same way. Have you ever worked for a good company? Boy, in front of a live audience, it's amazing how few hands go up. 3, 4, 5 hands out of 60 or 70. It's like, oh. And the rest of you thought it was just you. Oh, I picked some stinkers. Like, they're all stinkers. So moving forward, it's about brand value. Let's promote you up to being boss. You have to interview to find this person you're looking to hire. You have 1 interview spot left. You've got Todd here, and you have some other person just like Todd. They have the University of Florida, BS in Agriculture, the same engineering to manager to director, but they did it for 3 food and beverage companies you've never heard of. And there's like a million of them. Let's see who's going to get that interview. Todd or the other one? Todd or the other one? There is no question. Todd gets this interview every single time. value everywhere, but nowhere to be seen. You saw a resume with essentially nothing on it, and you could feel the value. Where you're going to lose that value is in your bullet points for your achievements, like your tangibles, your deliverables, the story elements. So every other piece that goes on that resume has to be negotiated with yourself to make sure it doesn't undo your value. It takes very little content to create the value, very little extra content to undo your value. So yeah, story is going to be focused on all of these things you see on screen. Obviously, all about performance. How do you change their view? Degrees of degrees. Have you received in hand your college degree? I know that sounds so strange the way I said that. You know, I got taught to ask it that way because as a recruiter, you know what I found out? I found out people were lying to me. You know what 3 credits shy of a degree is? No degree. You know what? I didn't pay that $168 that was still outstanding? No degree. What matters? The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you did not receive your degree, let's get over it. Put down your university, put down your college, put down your coursework toward field of study, not coursework toward a BS and whatever. That's too close to baloney, and there cannot be any 3-card Monty issues with your education. If you do not have it, it's coursework toward the field of study. Put down all the other things. Designing your resume, just to close, it's about moving your brand forward, helping them visualize your career value, helping them visualize your brand, which is your name. Also to see those trinkets and achievements, all that you built up along the way, of course, informed by educational background as well. Last word about Word. Once you do all this work, make sure to watch my Headless Horseman video over on my YouTube channel, Self-Recruiter, by the way, YouTube channel, and make sure to understand to convert it over to a PDF at the final stage. No matter what they ask for from me, they're only ever going to get a PDF. A Word document will not leave my cold, dead fingers. Never happening. Convert it over to a PDF, and all of their applicant tracking systems, if we're worried about those things, they all take PDFs. Years ago, dare I say, decades ago by now, long time ago, they're taking PDFs. By the way, back when I was a recruiter and the trainer and the VP of the 100 office, I used to evaluate all those applicant tracking systems, and even all the way back then, they all took PDFs. Take your first step in your new creation of your new resume, your new brand, the elevation of your value, and learn how to repeat this process. Hopefully you join me on Tuesday for the next lecture, and then next Thursday for the next lecture after that. All those lectures are going to come up here. And just wanted to give you just a couple words on cover letter as we sign off today. Cover letter is an important part of your process. If someone sent a resume to me without a cover letter, I'd never even consider looking at them, let alone consider hiring them. By the way, I'm not going to look at your cover letter until you make that last 8, 10, 12 people in the stack that I can actually look at. But if you didn't attach the cover letter in the first place, you would never even be in that evaluation process. Be yourself, show a brand vision. And if you need some help on the cover letter, there's an article over on my website, selfrecruiter.com. Just click the advice tab. It's called Knock Knock, How to Write a Cover Letter That Will Open Doors, take you through the entire structure of the process. Last word. If you need some help, if you need someone to help elevate your brand, if you're too emotionally close to your own story to see it in a new way, if your bosses have really projected too much negativity down on you and some of that's gotten absorbed and you need to shake some of it free, probably need to work with the right career coach. Packages are right over on my website, selfrecruiter.com. Just look under the services tab. And if you need to have a chat before you know which package is really the right one, send me a quick email. We'll set up a time to talk. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.